He would have a beer right there on camera. Clint usually sits outside with a cigar. It's probably too damn hot to sit outside right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a thunderstorm, so I didn't even know if I was going to be able to make it. The last one we had lightning and took out my AC. So I had to shut everything down. But it looks like it was.
I'm doing that pro thing. 1 second. All right. Very cool. Let me share my desktop. All right, we'll present that from the beginning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. I'm just popping out the YouTube chat so I can answer YouTube questions as well. Let me say hello over there. And we have a potentially volatile show today because for some reason, I just got another one of those burrs in my side about things people in the SEO world keep telling me, and they don't add up with like data I see, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on. And so I looked into the fundamentals of the concept, and I just returned to the basics, trying to find out what is actually the situation. So in this case, a person in a large SEO community was telling me that they tune their pages for lots of different keywords, and they're very successful at doing that. And those kinds of statements tend to not resonate well with me for a multitude of reasons. One of which I generally don't see that working well, and the cost effectiveness of doing that, trying to optimally tune a page for many different keywords, it's very problematic, because when you try to optimally tune for one keyword, you're generally de-optimizing the other keywords on the page. So if you're trying to be optimal for multiple goals, you tend to hurt other goals when you do that. So to me, it feels like there's a point of diminishing returns in trying to do that tuning operation optimally for lots of different targets. So I wanted to look into this more. So I made a call out last week for examples of web pages that rank well for lots of different keywords, and we got a fair amount of takers on it. So this is a pretty engaging topic, and a lot of people cared enough to research what they thought were the best examples they could find that illustrate the case. And so I'm working with these best examples, and they're amazing. So I'd like to give a shout out to Sagar. Hopefully I said his name correctly, but he gave me the two examples that we're talking about today, and said that I can publicly talk about them. So I'm going to publicly talk about them. And hopefully this is a very cool episode. So kind of like in the past, when I ruffled feathers about going into fundamentals of indexing and just trying to get the right fundamental definitions to be able to describe what's happening. This is the same thing, but it's in keyword clustering. Let's look at those fundamentals of what's happening so we can even like talk about it. And, there's so many people in SEO that go from zero to AI super genius on this topic. It seems like there's a complete lack of like the very basic fundamentals, the foundation that you need to know before you can go to those advanced levels. And so hopefully in this process where I'm learning about this space, we can fill in some of those fundamentals. Clint, you've been in the communities and doing this stuff for a bit. What are your thoughts on just the topic, not the debate? What do you think about this topic?
I like it because it gets people thinking and wondering. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a great question to ask because Google is ranking right pages for multiple keywords, but how far do you have to go as an SEO to get their attention to maximize that number? So I like it. I like the topic. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, we'll get through the boilerplate and then we'll dive right in. So, what's new on SEO this week?
This week we went over writing schema for a homepage and specifically the website schema and how you can build that out a whole lot better than just the standard plugins are doing to tell what the overall whole website is about versus just talking about a single web page. I think that ties in if you believe in authority and topical relevance and setting up silos to build all the topical relevance in your topic clusters and all that, you have to believe that giving the bots information and schema defining what your website is about on your homepage seems like a no-brainer. So we write that out. We use Rank Gear to do it.
Yeah, I kind of view keyword stuffing the same as attributes as kind of meta keywords 2.0. Do you think that's going to last?
I would kind of argue that just because, let's say you're using Quora and Quora says you need to do you put the 10 entities in there and these 10 entities are highly correlated with the rest of the top rankings. Under what most, I'm using air quotes, white hats would say is that I'm keyword stuffing the same as in the about by doing that. But am I really? I'm tying in the entities. I'm showing the bot exactly where it is, and I'm representing the content properly that's there. So I would argue that people that are doing that and holding that argument, they're saying, "Oh, you're just keyword stuffing the schema," are actually shooting themselves in the foot. And I hope they continue doing that and spreading that rumor around because it makes it so much easier to rank when their competition's done.
Well, my fear, I don't argue that it works. My fear is that Google won't let it continue to work because there's almost no difference between, the old school meta keywords and keyword stuffing the same as.
Well, I think the argument can be made that Google can make the title tag not be relevant anymore, so we shouldn't optimize our title tag.
Well, it's great. It's absolutely great if same as continues to work into the future and we can basically put lots of keywords into it. I'm just skeptical that Google will let that continue to fly. That's the thing, is if they killed it for meta keywords, I don't see what's to stop them from killing it for same as.
Well, that would be under the assumption that Google actually gets good enough where it's machine learning and AI gets good enough to legitimately understand and read content, i.e. like we would know context and intent and everything from a mathematical perspective, and you have to feed that data to something. So until Jarvis or whatever or Skynet is actually reading a book and understanding that book and grasping the concepts and content and the meaning behind all those words, it needs something. So sure, same as and all that stuff and keywords and keyword density, all that's eventually going to go away, but I think that you and I will be old and dead before that happens.
Quite possibly. It's something that interests me, so I'm watching it. It's one of those interesting areas to me. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see what happens. And definitely on the AI front, it was less than 2 years ago that we were saying on this channel, just wait, the next generation content spinners are going to come out and they're going to blow your mind away. And now everybody's talking about conversion AI and other tools like that that are auto writing articles. And even still, with things like Mum on the horizon that are built to like write content, the next generation from what we have today is going to blow all those things away. So I'm just going to double down and let it ride on that same 2-year-old prediction that we aced. I'm making it again. Double your bet. It's going to happen again.
Well, I'll tell you, today I watched OpenAI's newest release, and it's on software and specifically developing SaaS. So I can go in there and give it a paragraph and say, I want a piece of software that opens the top 20 websites, downloads the code, and compares and contrasts the code based off of these factors. I can type all these different things into it, and OpenAI's neural net will actually code that software in the language that I asked for it. And I was watching that presentation today, and they were showing off Python and HTML today, but I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, code generation is a very cutting edge space. It's similar to content generation, but more strict in the syntax.
Yeah, I think it probably the next level, right? I think as they get better at the code generation, the text generation will get better.
Is anyone safe from robots taking over?
Well, there's one piece that, and I've actually learned this by listening to a lot of the SEO fight clubs that you've done, Ted, over time. Even if you had AI that was able to read a book and understand, or read a web page and understand and compare and contrast in that way, right now, computationally, it's too expensive for Google to do over trillions of pages. So even when the technology exists, we still need the hardware, to be able to implement it. And until that time comes, we're stuck with the algorithms that Google currently has.
Well, it looks like Google's throwing in on a path to handle scale. And that path is don't do web search. Get out of searching the haystack for needles that match a keyword. Instead, they're doing AI curated web directory. So you can imagine that they have the world's largest web directory, so large that the user interface is you have to keyword search for the category, and then they'll always have 168 results in the categories. So in effect, they're not searching the haystack for the needles. They're AI curating a web directory and letting you keyword search the web directory. And there's past episodes where I showed that in the old school web directories that everyone said deserve to die, and a lot of those topics, you got a lot more results and a lot less spam in the old solution. The new solution isn't even as good as what we had before that everyone said deserve to die. And so Google's kind of continuing down this, be an answer engine and curate the directory path instead of letting us scour the web for all the needles in the haystack. But yeah, it'll be interesting. There's a computer science person out there that'll figure out how to let you search 200 trillion pages for the needles in the haystack. And that'll be some game-breaking technology when those new techniques and technology come to light. So, keep an eye out. There'll be a Google-like IPO when that stuff happens. And, definitely on these AI technologies, eventually one of them is going to be so good that it'll have a Google-like IPO. So definitely, if you're investing, keep an eye in those areas. Another cool show, the SEO video show. It's an interview show. Just search for it by name on YouTube. There's also Carolyn's podcast, Confessions of an SEO. I just got caught up on on the episodes I had missed. So it's another one I like recommending. You can search for this one in Google. It'll rank first. It's on a dozen different platforms, so it's got to be on the platform you prefer. So search for it. And then our friends over at NFG are doing a conference later this year. So there's a number of speakers. There's Mike Pierce, Craig Campbell, Brad Mabry, Joshua Fletcher, Corey Rose, Clint Butler's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Holly's going to be there. She's had probably the most hilarious presentation for the past year and a half. If you don't know what she's been doing recently, she's been driving around with 100 cell phones trying to influence mobile results. And so her presentations are hilarious because of all the fiascos and antics that ensue when you try to do that. It is definitely a funny presentation. I'm excited to see what she's doing because she doesn't stay on one topic too long. And Terry Power's going to be there. If you haven't met Terry, he's a very unique individual, very tactical, another person you got to follow. So it's September 30th, October 1st. It'll be live and in person. It's a cool event. So if you want to read about it, go check it out. It's another cool SEO group. Clint, what do you think of the NFG group?
It's going to be different because instead of like 10 speakers talking about 10 different subjects and leaving it up to you to put it together, they're rotating that. So it's like what Mike talks about will tie in with what Craig talks about, will tie in with what Brad talks about, assuming Craig's around, because I hear that Brad's going to kick his ass. That ties in with what Josh talks about. And so that's supposed to, I think it's going to be really cool to kind of see that and how they deal with it.
Yeah, these NFG events, they're different than normal conferences. They tend to be a lot more tactical, like people get in and show you what works and how it works and why it works. And so it tends to be more about walking away with skills than like, if you went to SMX and had a lot of people, just act all academic at you and there you go, you're done. So it's a different kind of show, and it tends to be a smaller group because it's more instructional. So a lot of stuff coming up. If you haven't heard about the bulk CTR manipulation course by Chris Palmer, that's a new one. The Profit Stacks by Oliver Duong is popular. I would call it a CRO, trying to tune your page to perform type of course. We got our SEO testing mastermind tomorrow. We have our featured member Friday as well, and the YouTube show roundup on Monday. Those are weekly things we offer. And then we have our AMA with Kyle. So if you're missing Kyle and need some Kyle time and you're an IMG, just go to that event, get your Kyle fix. He's still there. You can ask him what the heck is going on. Probably good that you do. He'd like to hear from you. And that'll bring us back to the next Fight Club. So keyword clustering basics. So the question is, can a page be optimally tuned for very different keywords and rank well for them? And in the end, in the beginning, I stated this will probably come down to my definition of rank well being different than other people's definitions of rank well. And so that's one area where, people are just going to disagree a lot. And then, of course, how different keywords need to be different keywords. That's another area where people are going to argue and bicker a lot. So in this tag cloud here, this keyword cloud, these would be keywords that people are searching for, and your page would be ranking well for these terms. So can you get, can you tune part of a page for cars and rank page 1 for that URL for cars? Can you tune a different part of that same URL for games and rank page 1 for games? And then tune a different part of that page for ducks and rank number 1 for ducks. And then tune a different part of that same page. So one page tuned in different locations on the page for different keywords, ranking 1 for those keywords. That's kind of the debate here.
So you took that in a completely different direction I thought you were going to.
Well, it's going to come back because I know what you're thinking, but it's all coming back. So there are two concepts that I kind of forced in that question. So one is, what keywords is a page optimally tuned for? So that's one way of looking at the problem space. And then what keywords does a page rank well for? That's the other one. So we have this input and this output scenario, and the people that are in the different groups talking about this area of SEO, they tend to kind of lean on one side or the other. And mostly, the vast majority are leaning on how many keywords can I rank for? And so you got to kind of, adjust your conversation for the lens that's being applied to the space. But it's not a clear, definitive thing you can do because people talk about it differently without acknowledging the differences. So does that feel better than that first slide, Clint?
Yeah, you just approached it from a different way than I thought you were going to. That's all.
So in this first example, we got data and we got this website, and we're looking at Ahrefs data on this. This website is page 1 for a short tail keyword, Hummingbird. And they also rank for things like hummingbird feeders and stuff like that. So this page ranks for 794 keywords on page 1 in Google. Like that's an awesome example. That's the type of thing I want to study. And so it's not high competition, though. The average cost per click on these terms is about $0.25. The average volume is about 1,000 visitors per month. The average position on page 1 is a 6. Now, there's a lot more keywords that are page 2 and beyond, but I'm using the SEO meme that the best place to hide a dead body is on page 2. So we're talking about ranking well. And so I want these keywords to actually produce a meaningful amount of traffic for the page. And if you're on pages 2+, your keywords aren't doing that. All right, so we start looking at some of these keywords, and you can see, they rank page 1 for Hummingbird. All right, so they got their keyword, their primary keyword that they're ranking well for. And they're also ranking for broad matches on these things. All right. So they're getting a lot of broad match traffic. And they're primarily there for, hummingbird feeders and hummingbird nectar recipes. That's kind of what the page is all about. And so they kind of get into that space, but it's like they're ranking well in a broad match context because they rank well for 1 or 2 very closely related keywords. So the way that they kind of approach this page is they rank very well for like one concept, and then they get a bunch of broad match traffic. And so when we look at what they're ranking for, what people are typing in, so you'll see the search typos in here as well. we find that they tend to type in, certain things the most that they tend to rank for. And that certain thing is Hummingbird. This page ranks well for Hummingbird. It's largely tuned for Hummingbird, and they get a lot of that broad match as well, including typos. And then when I search for the things they rank for on their site, they tend to not have those on page. So we know that they're not optimally tuning the page for those 700 things because they're not even putting most of those 700 things on the page. That's the nature of the broad match for ranking well for Hummingbird. So far, most of this appears to be ranking well for a keyword gives you a lot of broad match traffic for that one keyword you ranked well for. So the thing I did next was to remove all of the Hummingbird feeder related keywords. Let's find the keywords that aren't that. Let's eliminate that one keyword where they got a lot of obvious, very closely related broad match. Let's get those out of there. And then what you have left over is 52 other keywords that weren't those. And the average search volume on them was nothing, 64. The number of them that were on page one, there were 16 on page one for this page. The average position overall for these other terms was number 44. And the average CPC was a bit higher, surprisingly. But I mean, they're not getting good traffic being number 44 with an average search volume of 64. These things aren't driving traffic to their page. So without the broad match traffic for ranking for Hummingbird well, this page really isn't optimized for lots of different things. And so, but in here, interestingly enough, these other ones, they kind of fell into other broad match categories that weren't being tuned on the page. There's a feeder category, a nectar category, a sugar water category, a bird category, and a recipe category of the others. So, it's interesting that it's kind of a fractal zoom into a smaller set of niches around Hummingbird. So to me, I'm an old timer in SEO. I go back to the beginning. And so the old school way that we used to target long tail keyword traffic was we would have one keyword per page. And so we'd find an easy keyword to rank for that had targeted traffic for what we're offering, and we'd dedicate a page to it. And then around 2007-ish, the caffeine Mayday instant updates came around and they killed that long tail traffic methodology, just obliterated it. It's a little bit has come back because they retired the instant update. But that was like the golden era of long tail traffic. This new method is different, and in a way it's kind of better than that old method, because this new method, you rank well for one keyword. That's the price of entry for that broad traffic. But if you do that, you just pepper the page with closely related terms, and you get like a bonus 20-30% broad match traffic for having those closely related terms on your page. So is the keyword clustering beneficial? Hell yeah. And is the methodology more efficient than the old school way? Yeah, it is. You're making one page instead of 700 pages the old school way. You're making one page, but the cost to make it work is you have to rank well for one good keyword. You need that foundation keyword that ranks well for the peppering of all the other related keywords to expand your broad match traffic. And so the price to enter is higher, but the amount of pages you need to create and maintain is a lot fewer. So it's a trade-off, comparing the old methodology, which was easier. You didn't have to rank well for Hummingbird the old way, but you do have to rank well for Hummingbird the new way. So let's look at another, any comments so far on this? What do you think, Clint?
Oh, I'm good so far, tracking.
What do you think, Lee?
I would make a slight tweak. If you go back to the very first slide you had with all the keywords on it. Back one more, right here. Nope, the other direction, sorry. So that list right there. If I looked at this topically, that's hummingbird food. So food, feeder, nectar, sugar, water, and then, formula, recipe, mixture. I mean, those are all related things there. So I would look at this as a page that's optimally tuned for like a hummingbird food. And then if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, and you're right, by the way, it ranks number 10 for hummingbird, but it's like number 4 for hummingbird feeder.
Right. So if you're looking at, all of those words, those are, the biggest ones, are like ratio sugar and water and, all those sort of things, juice. That is a very telling, for a topic. So, I mean, it's a nuanced thing, but I would look at it and say that, that's tuned for that. And when you go to your next slide, the ones that you're looking at, that hummingbird feed formula isn't on there, but it's highlighting hummingbird nectar recipe, which is basically a synonym.
Yep.
So, I'm saying, all right, it really is all the stuff that is related and synonymous with, hummingbird feed or food and feeders. And then when you look at your next slide there, I looked at that and I was like, wow, a lot of those are still related to that. Even when you pulled out the other stuff, you got sugar, water, nectar, all of those things are still there. I'm not seeing anything that falls outside of that hummingbird food topic.
Yeah, they aren't putting exercise bicycles in here and ranking for that. It's definitely not what's happening.
Right.
So we have this other example that Sagar also sent me. And so it's ranking for 239 keywords on page 1. And this particular company and this data is in the India market. So you will have to change, if you want to reproduce this data, you'll have to change your Google search to India to do this example. The average cost per click on these is very low. So again, this isn't high competition, but when we pulled these examples, when I made the request for these examples, I didn't want somebody to come back and say, well, look at Viacom, they're doing awesome. Well, if you have a mountain of authority, yes, you can put any keywords on your page and rank for them. But 99.999% of SEOs do not have a Viacom of authority assets to leverage for ranking. So we have to look at what can an average SEO do. And these examples aren't sitting on a mountain of backlinks that you could never produce. In fact, these examples have kind of pitiful off page. So they're doing these things largely with, mediocre off page and their on page tuning. And that's why these examples are so fascinating to me. So this one, it ranks for 239 keywords on page 1, low competition CPC. The volume for monthly traffic is, fairly low. Their average position across these keywords on page 1 is number 5. When you put in a short tail keyword, treadmills, in that Indian market, they're number 4. So they're page 1 for a short tail keyword. Again, this is kind of that authority keyword that helps the rest of this technique work. So we look at their keywords again, and again, they're, not lots of different topics. They're all closely related. You'll see that they get the in India type keywords as well because of that regional focus. And again, we're seeing, that leading power keyword that kind of that fuels the whole system. You rank well for treadmills, and then you pepper your page with closely related keywords to treadmills, and you get a lot of extra broad match traffic on the page. You get that bonus 20 or 30%. And bonus 20 or 30% for peppering your page with extra keywords. So no brainer. And that's double-digit growth 3 times over. You should pace yourself so that you could roll it out year over year and just look like an unending rock star. I mean, that's that type of victory if you can just grant 30%. That's amazing. That's totally worth doing. But it's not that original premise that people were telling me, oh, I can rank a page for different things, multiple different things, and do well with them. I can rank for plumber and electrician and kitchen remodels all on the same page. No, you can't, and this doesn't show that you can. And so I'm still soliciting examples. If you have examples of someone ranking for 3 different keywords at the same time from one URL, like very different keywords, I want to know about it. So let's see if we can find examples where they aren't like this, where you're just ranking well for treadmills and then getting a lot of broad match traffic because you rank well for treadmills.
What's interesting here is that both of the examples that you have are low CPC, easier to rank for a lot of synonyms and, long tail type thing. I know Clint works in some of the higher end markets that tend to be more backlink driven. So Clint, have you had pages that rank for 200 keywords for a single page on page 1?
I did it. I have, and the way that I do it is through anchor text, and not necessarily optimizing on the page. So I don't really go deep. Like I don't pick 200 of the related searches and put them in there. I'll go my primary topic, treadmills, and then I'll break it down with the tags and the outline format of equipment, exercises, walking and running or whatever, right? So that's how, and then after I rank it, I let Google figure it out. It'll shoot me back 50 to 100 keywords, and then I hit those with anchor text and just keep chasing that rabbit. And that's how I do it.
But it's possible at the very high end of the market then, because you've dealt with, some of those niches that are notoriously link driven rather than on page driven.
Yeah, because basically Google's saying, hey, I think this page will also do well in here. And then you go back with your backlinks and say, yep, Google, you were right. And you kind of substantiated it a little bit. It helps also if there's some CTR there, but the links play the biggest factor, the links in the anchor text.
So if there are more examples that show a different story, please do send them to me. I want to know about them.
How would we, let's go back to the word cloud because it'll keep me focused instead of looking at these. But let's say I'm doing a page and I got, I don't know, we got the different cities there. So there's Bangalore, I think there was a couple other in there. No. So motor, online, and home. Those are 3 different topics. What if you had the exact same keyword density for each of those words in a 2,000 word article. So the article is 2,000 words, and then you put the same, I don't know if it's be density or frequency. It'd probably be frequency, right? For each one of those words in there. I wonder if you could do it that way.
Well, one of the examples that I wasn't given permission to talk about, so I can't mention any specifics, but they actually did try to tune the page for 3 different keywords. And it was remarkable because they did have some degree of success doing that. I wouldn't say it was a great degree of success, but they proved that you can attempt to do that and get some data. But what was so odd about it was that 90% of what they ranked for was one of those 3 attempts. And the other 10% was the more distantly related stuff and the other 2 primary attempts.
Right.
And so it looks like, even when you try to tune the page for multiple keywords, Google's still gonna force you into one of them. And so I'm definitely eager to look at more examples that people send me, because, this is something we need to understand the fundamentals of. People are out there, talking about the very high level AI, keyword clustering for SEO. But what does it mean to what we do every day? How did it fundamentally change SEO? And it did fundamentally change SEO. I think the way that it fundamentally changed SEO is that it still appears to be a 1 keyword per page game. But when you successfully SEO that 1 keyword, you use those keyword clusters to then get the bonus 30% broad match traffic out of Google.
Yeah.
So it's a step 2. It's not a step 1. Step 1 didn't change. You're still ranking for treadmills, and you have to do that to be able to get that bonus 30%.
So what if I was doing 3 words, being able to rank for motor, online, and home, in your opinion, that would be to say that you can do it. Would you be looking at like 33% across the board? Or
I think those would be tough because they're so unrelated. Like if you were doing motorized treadmill, foldable treadmill, and walking treadmill, like you could
I know, but what I was referring, I'm just using that example based off of the one that you started with at the beginning of the presentation. 3 totally unrelated keywords.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing games, ducks, and remodeling, for you, would a win be that each one of those gets 33.333 whatever percent the rankings?
I'd want to see them all on page 1. And I bet you that you get something similar to what we've already seen, where if you do it well, you're going to get 200 page 1 rankings. But I suspect what's going to happen is 90+% of those page 1 rankings are going to be for one of these 4.
Yeah.
And that the other ones, you might get onesie twosie on page 1, but it's going to be in that 10% that is hard to justify. So you'll put in all that equal effort in trying to get the pages tuned for those 4 keywords, and Google's still just going to pick one.
What if it was cars, games, ducks, games? Does that fall into the games?
Yeah, now you're centralizing around games, and you're doing broad match for types of games.
Okay, so that would fall into the 90% thing. Okay, got it.
So again, so if we go back and look at this data, we had 239 keywords for treadmills on page 1. When we removed all of those closely related synonyms and the broad matches for treadmill, it goes down to 99 keywords. overall, and only 31 are on page 1. And the average position on those other keywords that weren't very treadmill specific, is around number 40. So, and again, still low CPC, low competition. What was interesting again is it was another fractal zoom into keywords. So these other ones are closely related to Power Max, exercise equipment, running machine. So it's kind of like we're zooming in on a small part of the fractal here. So it's interesting that it kind of behaves in a similar way to the primary keyword for the outliers. But again, mostly it appears to get a lot of broad match traffic for ranking well for one keyword. So that's what I have for the show today. Let me see if there are any questions here. We have, Dre is in the YouTube audience today. He's asking if the NFG event is recorded. No, I don't believe they record their events. I think they like to keep them secret.
Yeah, they don't record them.
And Susie mentions topical relevance, difficult to get out of that. Yeah, it appears to be the way that it works. So, we aren't, this isn't a done deal. This is my first look at actual data into these concepts. And, what I'm hoping to do is to figure out the perspectives that SEOs are using when they talk about this, and trying to figure out ways to isolate concepts and to talk about them effectively. Because when I was in those SEO communities trying to go, no, that doesn't sound right, there wasn't effective communication. They were speaking about things that I wasn't seeing the way they were intending me to see them. I mean, there's just two trains passing in the dark. Let's see, are they trying to move from single keyword optimization into single entity optimization? Probably. Those databases are absolutely massive. You can usually find a page in Wikipedia for your shorter tail keyword searches. Since they are generally closely related terms used to describe them, yeah, there are probably entities in play in identifying the related topics. It seems to me that there would probably be some AI around that. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I think that's, sort of when I was looking at the topical stuff, Power Max is a type of treadmill, and, they're clearly pushing those out on the page, which is why they're ranking for them. Fitness equipment, running machine is certainly a treadmill thing. Exercise equipment or fitness equipment is related, but not, not necessarily a synonym per se. But, if we go back to your idea that, Google is doing sort of their own curated directory, then you would want pages that covered a wide variety of topics. So you don't have to find the best one that ranks for gym equipment store near me in India, or something along those lines. You can just get one that, covers the topic very well and pick, and sort those. So you have a smaller list of curated pages that cover a wide variety of things. That would make more sense rather than trying to figure out of the trillions of pages, which one is best for, gym equipment store in India.
Yep.
So, I mean, it makes sense that they would go after pages that answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, I agree. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. If you have examples that I should be looking at, you can reach out to me on Skype. You can reach out to me on any one of the, the big SEO groups. And I'd be happy to look at it. Just let me know if I need to keep it confidential or not. I do honor that. So if you don't want me to talk about your example, just say so and I won't. But I think it's really cool that we're looking at these. So keyword clustering, is it a valuable practice? I'm leaning towards yes, it is. Is it that SEO works completely differently than it did in 2007? No, it doesn't appear to be. Based on most of the examples I've seen so far, it's still one keyword per page, but your step 2 is different and it gets you like a bonus 30% of broad match traffic, which is amazing. That's something you want to do. If you get a ranking, it's totally free to get that extended broad match traffic. And that's what this appears to be about. There's probably an advantage though on the front end. So the other part that I can't speak to yet, I haven't looked at it enough yet, is that if you did that content clustering up front, you might just have an easier time with the relevancy part of your page tuning. So you might be able to just get relevant, quicker using that tool set. So there might be value in that, even though you wouldn't get necessarily the bonus broad match traffic until you hit a critical mass in your rankings of your primary term. But you can get some traffic just by being indexed for those things. So it wouldn't be zero, but it might not be optimal. We really have to do more studying into it. What do you think, Lee? You do a lot of the keyword clustering on page creation.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, there's a lot that we don't know. And we can only go by sort of, our interpretation of what we see out in the field. And I think a lot of the tuning, if you can tune around the tightly themed topic, you can, do well. You can capture a lot of related keywords, but what's the optimal way to do it? We don't know yet.
And how far can you push it? Because, clearly it stops working when you get too far from that main keyword. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that when I've worked with online retailers, your page is about gaming headsets for Xbox. How far can I push the authority of this page into other keyword areas? And the answer is not far. It has to be closely related to what that page ranks for. And so, there aren't guidelines on how far you can drift away from the topic.
Yeah, if Google would only make its knowledge graph public, we could just analyze it and figure it all out, but they're not doing that.
Well, we'll see. Maybe we can reverse engineer it. But with that, thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.